know that it started, then I'll kind of make introductions.
Okay, yep, we're all set.
Okay, good. Thank you. Again, welcome all of you to our series on competency-based education. And prior to introducing other instructions, what I'd like to just run by you is an idea that I've been working on, and it's going to be Lisa Sitkins and I and Dave Richards out of Fraser, Michigan, and we're just having conversations about it right now. So, but you know, kind of keep my contact information available, because although there are various groups of people who collectively meet to talk about competency, my goal with this group is to get a bunch of practitioners who can meet face-to-face initially, and then maybe for a day or two, and then as follow-up do regularly scheduled conference calls. And what's going to be different about this group is we'd like to get a cross-section of people from across the United States to participate, because I think we're going to get, just because of legislation and the difference in kind of demographics and that kind of thing, I think we can really learn from each other. We really want people who are already in the implementation stage at some level. They may be well into it or just kind of launching it, you know, a year or two in, kind of a thing. But, you know, the idea is to really have a broad spectrum of experience for these conversations. So if you're at all intrigued by that, I think most of you have our website, edtechspecialists.com, and then my contact information is on there. Please reach out to me, because I would love to get, because I have a feeling that, you know, some of you are from areas other than Michigan. We'd love to hear from you. Now, that said, I did see that there's somebody here from Michigan, and I was not aware that we had some other competency kind of programs going on already. So I'm not limiting this to people outside Michigan. I didn't want to convey that, but rather to make sure that we're just kind of, because we don't know of a lot going on in Michigan, we want to reach beyond our boundaries and get that cross-section of people participating. So I will get started, and this Lisa Sitkins and I are facilitating these webinars, and I hope that you will all look at the EdTech Specialist website, target the bullseye, and you'll see the list of webinars that are coming up. We've changed the name of the series from the summer series to just the series, because the webinar series, because we really have expanded and added on. You'll notice that Michael Horn has been added on since our last one, and I will encourage all of you to kind of keep up to date, because I'm talking with a few other people as well about perhaps participating. And so right now I think we're going up through, I think it's even November, but you know, so obviously it's beyond summer. So we're going to, you know, keep adding on, because we're getting a lot of interest. We're getting people who are, you know, going to be using some of these webinars for conversations in their staff, for professional development. We have someone on with us today that is doing kind of a professional development with a group in her district. Cindy, it's always nice to have you with us, and I'm glad that you're going to be, and in particular, I think Cindy's group is going to look at your book, Rose, and use that as kind of the centerpiece of where they have their conversations, which I think is a great idea. So prior to, I'm going to get to the introduction of you, Rose, because I'm very excited to have you with us. I do want to just give some of the parameters here. One of the things that we're that we'd encourage you to do is, you know, and Rose encourages you to do, is have a conversation. Now, because we have a large group, what we would like you to do is either put your question into the chat area, and Lisa's going to kind of be monitoring that, and then, you know, bringing you in if it's a time-sensitive question, or kind of waiting toward it to a point where she'll ask the questions, and, you know, where there's a break or at the end. But if you would like to have a direct conversation with Rose, put that in the chat as well, and we'll open up your microphone so that you can do that. We found in the last few that that can be really nice, and then there's that back and forth immediately, and so that can kind of get to a different depth. So we encourage all of you to participate. Again, for those of you who just came on, this is being recorded, and I now have it all. So it's such an honor and pleasure to have you with us this morning, Rose. Rose and I don't even remember how we first met. I think it was maybe Susan Patrick who kind of connected me to you. But It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be a part of conversations and reading your book as you were developing that off the clock, moving moving education from time to competency. If you have not read that book, Rose, I don't know if you know how many people I've bought and sent that book to, because I just think it really gets people thinking on a very important level of how critical this is for kids when you personalize education to that level. And it just really serves, and that's why I'm glad, Cindy, you're going to be using it with that group. It really serves as a tool to really kind of initiate different kinds of questions that, we all kind of wonder about what is this going to look like and what is it like for kids. But, it's really important that all of us begin to learn about it, even if we're not in total sync with all of it at this point. I think it's really important that we all begin to have some references, and that's a great book to learn from. Rose actually came to Michigan a few years ago because we had the Consensus for Change think tank and had some conversations there and asked her to join us. So that was it's nice to not only have the professional contact, but the personal contact, and that makes it all that much richer a relationship. So, Rose, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think Lisa's going to give you the screen, and I will, transition over to you. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcia, and I certainly have appreciated the connection with Michigan and your support and conversations over the years. Competency education has really grown. When I think that the book was published in 2012, that where we are today, I need to get book number 2 done because it's gone so far, so fast. Today I really wanted to take the work that I do with schools, with districts, and at the state level. I do a lot of policy work, but I'm a teacher at heart. I'm a curriculum specialist and a competency specialist, and much of the hard work is really, from my point of view, a systemic approach to what competency looks like in our schools, and it's absolutely important that we build coherence in the system. So the way I see it, and I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death here, but I want to provide in the PowerPoint and in this recording information that you can use to take back to your school districts to think more deeply about the different aspects of this. But really the way I look at things is that traditional teaching and learning has been all about building systems that support face-to-face learning. A teacher standing in a classroom, and of course being time-based with grade level structures and such. But when we really look at a school that's transformed into these new sets of practices, you really move curriculum, instruction, assessment, and grading into something that looks a little bit different. It's going to be about high-quality competencies, about performance assessments, about personalized learning pathways for kids and dynamic grading. So this is what I consider a new competency education framework in which to look through and look back at the work that's currently in place to move them different pieces forward. So that's really the thrust of the conversation today. I looked over the webinar and the conversation that Chris Sturgis had as part of this series, so I don't want to dwell too much on what competency education is, but I want to just establish it at the beginning that creating a common understanding for what competency education is absolutely essential in having students, teachers, parents, community members, policymakers understand what it looks like. And it's a belief set, and that's really a very strong statement that you point to. It isn't a binder on a shelf. It isn't a lot of the things that we've defined education in the past. It's really a system of beliefs, a vision, if you will, and it's based on research. And I think in all of the work that I've done, when I'm questioned about certain pieces of this work, I always go back and say, well, what is the research telling us about this? We have not actualized the potential of the educational research that we've been doing for years. We respect it, we cite it, but we don't. And now we're in competency education, really saying this is right for kids, and here are the reasons why. Just looking at Carol Dweck's work on growth mindsets is probably one of the most revolutionary things that we should be looking at as we're looking at who our kids are in our classrooms. The notion that it isn't just about a student's academics, it's really about who are they, what's their social emotional needs or that impact their learning, what are the habits of learning that prepare kids, and the whole body of research around the zone of proximal learning. If we just took that one thing and designed teaching and learning around that, it would change how we do things every day. So again, I think a lot of the rationale when people are forced to look at changes coming, that we sometimes don't know how to answer it. And the best answer for all of these pieces is we have the research that says this is good. This is what we should be doing. It isn't something that in my world of working with folks, it's great in a school district if you have a school that's kind of a lead on some of this work, but this is really systemic work. It has to work together, K through 12, in a system. And the reason for that is that whether it's a district of a couple of elementary schools, a middle school or two, or a high school or two, you're still having students move through an articulated time progression through that district, and every district, and this is what society is demanding of education today, we must be able to show and prove that when we hand over a diploma to a student at graduation time, that they in fact are college and career ready. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, because that's one of the biggest challenges in all of this. We've done all the curriculum stuff, and kids aren't ready for college and career, and our data is telling us that. Finally, the last piece is that we need to ask more of our students, and we also need to be very clear about what proficiency looks like. And the way that we communicate learning is through our grading systems, and we have to be very sure that our grading systems aren't just about measuring completion and compliance the way traditional grading has done in the past, or that it's a very subjective approach to communicating a student's learning. We really have to be sure that what we communicate on our report cards represents what the student has demonstrated, and that level of proficiency that is demonstrated, and how as a school we bring students to competency. And that is through performance. So how do we look at performance-based proficiency? What does it look like? How do we define it? When is a student competent is an essential question in all of this work. So that's really how I view bringing folks into the thinking around competency education, that we start at that level and sometimes really talk about, when we talk to parents and to communities, what are their hopes and aspirations for their kids? And you'll find that what you hear from parents, even from educators, and from community members, is that they really want this for their kids, but they haven't defined it as competency education. It's up to us to say, this is a way that we can approach this now that we haven't in the past, that can bring them to where you envision and aspire your kids to be in their futures. So really a question that we ask is, who's your graduate? Right now, if you, and I do this work and as part of the grounding and the beginning work around competency education, is who is your graduate? And in many cases we just say, in our traditional systems, a graduate is a person who's accumulated a certain number of credits. But in no way do we say our graduates are truly ready to embrace the next stage of their life. And we hope that they are, but we don't have the proof for that. And in fact, the data tells us differently. The data is saying we've got kids going off to college with A's and B's, but in fact, their level of readiness once they get there isn't there. And we could be measuring the wrong things on those report cards, and we have to ask those questions. So the first thing is who's our graduate, and then as a school or as a district especially, what are the competencies that your graduate needs to demonstrate that they're college and career ready? And I'm sure when you ask parents, when you look at the research, you're not going to come up with answers that lie in the academics only. You're going to have a set of dispositions, if you will. David Conley has really defined the work quite nicely around what it is that those characteristics are, those dispositions are. But we fail in not teaching kids how to be proficient in these dispositions or in assessing it. We just assume that the student has it or they don't. And sometimes we relegate, they don't have it, what can I do about it? Rather than embracing it and say, this is where the student is at in their readiness, and how can we as a school bring that student into full readiness for the step in their lives. So this is a huge conversation that is at the heart of starting these conversations around what are the changes that we need to look at that would are most in need of answering that demand around college and career readiness. We look at it this way: we have academics, and academics need to be defined K through 12. And I'll talk about that in the new framework. But then with that, we call them in New Hampshire work study practices. Let's call them dispositions for the sake of Michigan. But some people have used the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. Habits of Mind would be another piece. Whatever those pieces are that you recognize it, we have to recognize it K through 12, not just at the high school level. But it creates these sets of learning progressions. And it's these learning progressions that we look at that are not grade level associated, but that lead to that college and career readiness. And I can look at those learning progressions and see assessment targets along the way, and where students have reached the proficiency targets that we're looking for, those progressions. I'll give you a better idea shortly as we look at what the framework is. This has been our traditional framework in education, and mostly the traditional framework of face-to-face learning, brick and mortar. We have curriculum that's generally fairly well defined, standards-based. Standards-based is an era, by the way, and it's an era that's gone by. Folks who are just coming into doing work around standards-based, they need to know that it's good work to do, but it's just the beginning of what's going to take you further. It's not the end point of the work. Generally fixed by grade or by course. And generally, our system has been based, especially on the No Child Left Behind era, around the notion that, I'll use fourth grade for an example. I have a fixed curriculum in fourth grade, and every student in fourth grade is going to be assessed against that content, that curriculum that says this is what fourth grade is about. And then, even knowing that some kids haven't met usually through some type of assessment, we find out kids haven't met the criteria of performance for that curriculum, then we intervene. And we've designed our systems. If we really look at where our financial resources are going, where our teacher resources are going, it's generally clustered around getting kids to this fixed point of a curriculum. They're broken. They need to be fixed. And so we have all these different intervention systems based on that. And teachers, since we've begun the No Child Left Behind era, have really moved to coverage of standards. They've stepped into a different mode. They are very much pressured by pacing guides, by needing to check off that they've introduced a standard or spoken to a standard in a classroom, and a lot of research around some of the MetLife studies and some of the Lumina studies, really saying that teachers don't love their profession much anymore because of what the reason. This is one of those reasons. Instruction, it's all on the teacher's shoulders. It's in many cases at the elementary level, when data has shown that kids aren't performing at an achievement level that people are happy with, they introduce these programs, and these programs are multi-grade level programs in a particular content area, and the program drives the learning. And in fact, those programs require, in some cases, in many cases, a great deal of fidelity. In fact, we have teacher supervision systems that are set up around a teacher's effectiveness being measured by where they are in the program and are they following the program. And you see that especially in some larger systems. Again, the emphasis is on content and skills delivery. Kids have covered it. This has really introduced the notion of the worksheet, and the worksheet is the proof I've covered it. And in this case, instruction, if we look at projects, and this is a key piece to when you see the competency framework, but really follow the learning. In other words, we teach them up and then we give them a project. And oftentimes we see 24 projects that look alike, that follow a checklist of what the project should be. I've done quite a lot of research in assessment. I teach advanced graduate studies courses at Plymouth State University, and in curriculum and assessment. And we've done quite a lot of classroom observations of actually walking into the classroom around when an assessment is given. We say, what is the assessment that's being given? What's on the assessment? What does it look like? And the data, qualitative data as well as some quantitative data for us has shown that traditional learning is very predominantly paper and pencil. That rich formative assessment that has other ways of getting feedback aren't in classroom, but it has really questionable depth of knowledge associated with it. So when we look at the paper and pencil tests and we on the test and say what depth of knowledge is each of the questions, the questions tend to fall at very low recall and identification type levels. Grading, I could spend a whole day or two just on grading, but traditional grading, we all know, highly subjective, very variable, teacher to teacher, which is interesting when we start talking about K through 12 coherent grading systems, is to put report cards up that are in a district and look at what's actually being communicated about learning along the way, K through 12, and that gives you understanding why parents are very mistrustful of grading practices by teachers. A lot of energy is spent around that. And also when you look, you'll see that academics can very easily get confabulated or mixed in with a lot of non-cognitive dimensions. Completion of work, is homework being done? All of those pieces play out in what a student's grade looks like, and it varies across the K through 12 pathway. So that's where we've been. Education has put a lot of stock into these 4 pillars. We give degrees in this. We have positions, other than in grading, I think, but we have positions in districts around each of these pieces of the traditional framework, and we keep trying to make this better. And what we have to really look at is we've outgrown this framework. This framework is not going to get us to where we need to go around highly personalized, customized learning that is competency-based, that does lead to college and career readiness.
Rose, I have a question.
Sure.
From the group. Dave Richards mentioned that redefining graduation requirements is a major challenge as they try to comply with state requirements. And as your last slide showed, that traditional environment is focused around the state requirements and meeting those standards and things like that. Have you found that in other states they're finding the same problem as trying to redefine those graduation requirements because the graduation requirements meet this, but we want to switch to competency? How are districts overcoming that?
Yeah, I think I really need to be clear that graduation is requirements. Okay, the college and career readiness is based on standards, but you need standards define content and skills. That's what standards do. And every state has got sets of standards for that. We're not arguing that. You need that, right? But competency means how are those standards being used in a learning context so that students can transfer and use those and apply those standards to demonstrate mastery. It's a call that's much higher than just covering the standards. So there's no problem with what state standards have to say. They're great guidelines. You need those. But now I have to say, what is it that the student can show me with that content and skills that says that they have complex reasoning and higher order thinking skills as we use Webb's depth of knowledge, that they've used strategic thinking and extended thinking to demonstrate that they can use what they've learned. So it's a different piece to what that looks like, okay? And that is the conversation, okay, is that difference between standards and competencies. And we need the standards. I'm not walking away from standards. I'm just saying, but that we've done a lot of coverage of standards and it hasn't gotten us to where we need our kids to be. And we certainly haven't paid attention to the dispositions of learning that need to be part of it. So I hope that's going to help. It may help if you look at the competency education frameworks. So hold your thinking. We'll get back to it if we need to. Okay. So the traditional framework is very teacher-centric. It puts a lot on the teacher to deliver. Whereas in the competency framework, it's the student that does this. There was a great blog on Competency Works last week by Bill Zima, who says, you know, we're coming into a new school year, we're doing things differently this year. We're looking at our kids and where they are in math, and then we're going to deploy our teachers around the groupings that have emerged from looking at the student data. Versus the old way of, here are the kids, regardless of what the data says, if they're in 4th grade, they all go into a certain classroom. Well, we'll try to group them as we go along and try to meet their needs as we go along. But they took that very student-centered approach to say, we're going to start where the kids are at. And we know going into 4th grade, not all kids are capable of the 4th grade curriculum. They still have skill sets that aren't there. So we now will engage around instructional resources to bring them along. We don't look at interventions for kids who can't do the work. We say, where are they, and let's move them forward. And research around the RISC Consortium has really shown that when kids are learning at their instructional level, it takes them less time than trying to teach them at levels that they're not ready for, and continually trying to backpedal into what they can do. So teach them where they're at and move them forward. And the big breakthrough on this are these two pieces around the student-centeredness. That's blended learning and personalization. Very, very difficult to do student-centered, highly personalized learning unless you're invoking blended learning. And I'm really pleased that Michael Horn is going to be speaking to this cohort, because I have seen in all of the work in both in public education and in the charter world, that the biggest breakthrough for moving kids along in their learning and engaged in their learning and taking ownership for their learning is when blended learning is introduced. And given the technology that we currently have in the classrooms, we need to do that. We have a lot of what we need. We just need to get those systems going around the blended learning piece, and not kind of use the computers in the classroom as a plug-in. I use the analogy of overhead projectors. I go into classrooms where I see smart boards and see all sorts of computers. They're doing the same thing as what the teachers used to do on blackboards with chalk, putting notes on a board. We're not using the technology wisely for learning, and that we have to grapple with. We have to talk about what our expectations are along those lines. Basic guideline that we use along this line is anything that is content delivery, content acquisition, and even skill can be relegated to computer. Teachers should be involved in engaging with students around new learning, around supporting their learning in small groups, but not in content and skills delivery piece. That is certainly well suited for the blended component of the classroom experience for kids. I'm going to show you a little.
Rosa, I have another question. Jen Birmingham is asking, could you talk about the difference of competency education from traditional tracking that ended up being a barrier for students in progressing?
Right. It isn't tracking, very simply. I can tell you, I go into some classes and people who are really defend their RTI models, and I see the same kid in the same group in June as I saw in September, and I say, well, is that really interventional? Is the intervention working? So when we really look at the student-centered learning piece, we're taking the evidence along the way and making the appropriate decisions on what group they're best suited for to do the work at hand. So it's very dynamic. We don't put kids in groups and assign teachers to those groups and the groups stay in place. It's the teachers, and as you look at the blended learning model, the rotational models and the flex learning models, you'll see that students emerge in different groups based on the pace at which they're doing their learning. That's the difference. It's not a pace for learning that's imposed on kids by group. The students are learning at their individual paces, and then we spin out these kids into groups that are most appropriate for the instruction that level that they're at. So it's dynamic, okay? And so it isn't tracking, and it's not meant to be, and it's not fixed grouping by any means. I'm going to introduce you to a little bit about what it looks like. Again, this isn't what we'd find at every school in New Hampshire, but this is we have had a call for what does this thing look like, and so this is what we have, and I hope you'll like it. It's about 10 minutes long, but you'll get the idea.
What is competency-based education? What does it look like in our New Hampshire classrooms? How does it affect student learning? Listen as New Hampshire students, teachers, and administrators share their understandings and experiences with competency education in New Hampshire. Ryan, a senior from Pittsfield Middle High School, tells us what competency education means to him and how it prepares him for his future.
So to me, competency-based education, it's a kind of alternative grading system where students are held accountable for all of the course material. And in the real world, when you're working at a company, if you can only do 75% of your job, you're going to get fired. So it's preparing you to really be able to know everything that a class or a job entails rather than just passing by on an average.
Elizabeth, a high school student at Souhegan High School, also shares what competency-based education means to her and explains how Souhegan's competencies, or ALEs, academic learner expectations, have benefited her learning.
Competency education means to me learning more about yourself as an individual learner. The ALEs at Souhegan have really helped me to find my own strengths and my own weaknesses in my school environment. So what I really loved about them is when you got your test back or an assessment back and you saw that the ALEs were being assessed on were laid out in front of you, it was a very clear distinction on what you did well on and what you need work on. And from that, it's very easy to sit down with your teacher and just think to yourself as well, setting out a plan for yourself to improve in the section that you need improvement on. For example, if you're doing a project and you really nailed the complex thinker and you got the analysis down, but you had a hard time with the effective communicator, it's so much easier to see that on your assessment grade and try and fix that for the future than it would be just to get an 85 out of 100 or something. So you see specifically what you need to work on.
Teachers and administrators in New Hampshire are also seeing the benefits of how shifting from traditional evaluation practices to competency-based education better prepares students for their futures. Chris Tebow explains.
Competencies, they're really just standards for learning, and if students can understand why they're learning something, then they can understand what they need to learn and how they can apply it and what to do with it after the class is over. competency-based instruction, it isn't just about taking the material and sitting down and completing a lesson. It's about applying that material, not just in class or next week or next month, but for the rest of their lives.
Anne Hadwin talks about the shift to competency-based education and how that has changed student learning experiences.
By shifting to competency education, we want students to really focus on skills, on being able to apply that knowledge. It's no longer just, paper and pencil. It's really being able to demonstrate something in a real-world fashion. That could be the workforce, it could be college, it could be the military. We're also preparing them for jobs that don't even exist right now.
More specific information about how competency-based education has changed teaching and learning to better prepare students for their futures is shared by Mark Sampson.
The inclusion of the STEM protocols and principles exemplifies how students focus on those critical thinking skills to solve problems both theoretically and in the real world. As we shift into a full 21st century model and we include high inquiry technology-based opportunities in addition to a new approach of mastering content and its applications, we're really helping our students shift towards the needs of their future.
Moving students to mastery of knowledge and skills is a key component of competency education. Teachers use authentic assessment practices to help them understand where their students are in their learning and how they can use that information to adjust their instruction to move every child to mastery. Monique Temple shares her experiences.
Working in a competency-based system has allowed me to look more specifically at skills within a competency. So I can drill down and look at specific performance indicators to see what skills students need to be working on in order to be successful. And also, if a student is successful, then I can look forward to the next year's competencies and see how do I move that child forward so that they're continuing to make progress and they can exceed the current standards. On the flip side, if a student was struggling, I could pinpoint specific areas within, say, math or reading and really guide my instruction to that area. Once upon a time, each student would get a grade and you wouldn't have any specific information on how that would change your instruction over time. And with competencies and breaking down into smaller pieces and then the performance indicators break it down a little bit smaller, you can really refine what you're teaching.
Megan Jair talks about how technology enhances and supports student learning and mastery.
Technology has enhanced our day and made our learning so amazing. We are able to differentiate beyond ways that I could have even thought possible. All students, they may have their iPad in front of them, but they're all doing different things. They're all engaged in content that's appropriate to their learning at different levels in maybe the same app or program. But it also allows us to give a set performance task. And the set guideline is the input, which is what we give them and we tell them they need to learn about and do. But they have choice in the outcome. So or how they want to show their learning is totally up to them. They could create a keynote about honeybees if we're learning about honeybees. They could create a telegami as a honeybee or a morpho as a honeybee. They could create a book. They could also just go to Pages and write a report if that's what they're comfortable with. But the technology has really allowed us to differentiate not only what the students are learning, but showing us how they're learning.
Learning progressions that are based on rigorous standards and performance tasks serve the purpose of ensuring that students' learning experiences are academically, intellectually, and personally challenging. They ensure that students' learning leads to the acquisition of skills and knowledge that can be meaningfully applied in a variety of educational, career, and civic contexts throughout their lives. Donna Donnell gives an explanation within the context of mathematics.
Students learn best in how we adapt our curriculum and instruction to meet the needs. As we set goals for student learning, the research identifies paths in which students progress when learning mathematical topics, and this developmental sequence goes through levels of thinking, from the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract. The impact this has on our instruction is the design of effective activities that are matched to help students progress through these levels.
Nicole Highmark talks about the importance of learning progressions and how they impact students' future learning.
Learning progressions is really a clear articulation to teachers about the role of content or skills or practices on the child's future experiences. So it's real clear and real critical that if a child does not demonstrate mastery within a particular concept, what that domino effect could be on future learning for that child. So it underscores the importance of deep understanding and deep engagement in specific content and skills, and provides that powerful roadmap for teachers, students, and parents alike.
Competency-based education requires a shift in grading practices. Brian Stack talks about the clarity and depth of detail that competency-based education provides.
Competency-based education has really helped provide some laser focus for our kids at attaining the skills that is going to make them successful in the 21st century. Our kids know exactly what they're learning, what they're supposed to be focused on, and what they can be doing to improve regardless of the class that they're in. I've seen a huge transformation in this philosophy and this vision with our students, and it's been pretty monumental. We spend a lot of time working with the colleges, both at the state level and at the national level, to help them understand what a competency-based education transcript looks like. Colleges in general are very supportive of what they're doing. They find that we're not only giving them better information on our kids and what they know and are able to do, but we're giving them more information. It's relevant to the 21st century. It's relevant to the college and career readiness skills that they're looking for to make sure that their students are going to be productive and high-performing students at their college and beyond.
PACE is an alternative assessment system that is currently being piloted in 4 New Hampshire school districts. Mary Moriarty talks about how performance assessments provide the clarity needed by teachers, parents, and students to ensure that students are ready for future opportunities in college and careers.
With our teachers, feedback that we get from them is that they now know very clearly where their students are excelling and where their students are struggling, and that's letting them really hone their instruction. Parents are now able to be very clear about where they can help support their children, and so it's really allowed us to have, I think, very clear communication about what students know and understand, and that's really allowed us to better utilize all of our supports to help all students get ready for future learning and work opportunities.
In New Hampshire, we are proud of our innovative undertaking of competency-based education. We are pleased to be moving forward in our new PACE pilot program and truly believe that well-developed and robust competency-based learning will serve to best prepare all students for their future success in college or career pathways. For more information,
I'm going to stop that here, and basically what you saw in that video is what this new competency education framework looks like. We've switched from the 4 pillars of traditional, from curriculum instruction, assessment, and grading, into competency-based, where we have articulated learning progressions across K through 12. It's as if we take the system that we currently have in curriculum and lift it up out of grade levels and start working and engaging kids around that learning in a continuum. That we have good competencies that guide that, and we map it. We need to see where students interact with these competencies across that pathway. It's a mapping process in curriculum that we've not done before. Very performance-based, as you saw with especially the students speak to that. But what we really have to do is we really have to say, what is competent? We have to define what competent demonstration looks like and create that as the anchor of our system. And that must be embraced across teachers teaching the same content areas at the same levels. We have to really understand what that looks like. What we do know about learning is that our minds do not work in silos. Research tells us brains is that we connect things conceptually, and projects are really very complementary, where the projects are the learning. It's not done after the learning. Where we have systems where kids learn formatively, and that's our evidence that they're ready for summative assessment, and not give a summative assessment when it's a particular day of the week or when everybody has to take it at the same time. And as in the rest of the world, we use the notion that multiple and varied assessments inform our evaluation of whether a student is competent. It's not a test taken on one day. That's the evidence for that. Instead of instruction, our framework is learning pathway. It's guided by who the student is, what they bring to their learning, and we look for systems of support to help that, as you saw with Megan Jare's description of the breakthrough of technology in her classroom around kids learning at their instructional level as the ultimate way of differentiation. The teachers simply can't do the level of differentiation we've expected them to after all the PD we've sent them through over the years. The blended and online supports are critical to this. We're seeing in a lot of our schools that are competency-based the notion of project-based learning or learning studios as the way to really augment rigor in the learning. By far deeper learning than teachers even envision in designing that learning. And then the grading, as Bryant Stack alluded to, we have to have teachers all practicing the art of grading the same way. All of our schools use a grading philosophy statement whereby they're all grading in the same way, and the purpose of communicating the learning is clearly shared with all the stakeholders. Relearning and reassessment is without penalty. Our traditional systems usually do have penalties associated with it, and again, we have to define what that set point is. I can see there's a question around other examples of dynamic grading. We do have a lot of our schools. The 4 school districts that you saw in that video all have K-12 competency-based grading systems in place. In some cases, they're still time-based. They aren't at the full level of development and to move on when ready that they're moving toward, because that takes time. But we certainly do have examples of grading, and I'd be happy to apply those to you. If you care to contact me about that, or we could do another session just on grading if you'd like. So the design begins with the learner, that we understand the student's assets, their learning style, their aspiration, their talents, their interests, and it's all part of a personal learning plan. This isn't information that we just file away. It has to be at the students and the parents and all adults that are working with the students. Hopefully, it's a piece that has its place and lives somewhere, that students use their personal learning plans to be a source of self-reflection around their learning, and that adults and parents can use that information to make decisions that are in the best interest of students along the way. And in traditional learning, we kind of do that for kids, and we don't engage kids around some of these decision points in what they do and how they learn. I'm not going to go into this mainly because of time right now, but we do have new personalized learning that need to be a very important part of it. As you can see, learner profiles, personal learning paths, individual mastery is critical in this. All right, it's not where do I test out against my classmates and then move on. It's, uh-oh, what's this evidence telling me? Sometimes it tells me I've already mastered something and I don't need to do further learning on it. I can move beyond it. Or, I'm not ready for that yet. Where am I in my learning? And finally, the key piece to me is move from fixed learning environments to flexible ones where we've got multiple instructional deliveries, optimizes available resources. And when I say resources, teacher resources in schools are as important. Online resources certainly are important. So that's, and I know Michael Horn's going to speak to the personalized learning, and I know you heard that from Chris Sturgis, and Susan Patrick can speak very eloquently to. This is the key piece of competency education, is those personalized systems. I see there's a comment about Marzano's proficiency scales, and yes, we in fact in our schools that are K-12 competency based use pieces of Marzano's power law, and we certainly use his proficiency scales in part. His scales are not competency-based, but they can provide a good foundation for customizing your grading model. And we do invite, that's the research basis, part of the research basis that we look at. And so how do we make that coherent in our systems? Because you just can't have a grading model that looks that way. You have to have how kids are learning and being assessed. It has to sync up with that also. So I think that pretty much finishes up, you know, what I consider the think-abouts in building these coherent systems. You need to be mindful of all of these different pieces, even though when you're undertaking the work of redesigning schools and school systems, you can't do it all at the same time. So I'll open it up now to other questions that may come up, or Lisa or Marcia, if you have any further questions, that would be fine.
I will step in for a second. Lisa, I think we covered the questions that are currently in the chat section. But is there anyone who would like to have their microphone opened up to have a two-way conversation with Rose? If you would, just kind of put that in the chat as well, and Lisa will open up your microphone so that you can do that. While you're considering that, I want to, before we turn off the recording and kind of close things up, I want to be sure to thank all of our sponsors today. Michigan Virtual University has been great in sponsoring many things that and many initiatives that we've been involved with, and we appreciate their support with these webinars. Along with them, we've got My Virtual Academy. I encourage you to look at our website. You'll see their logos there. You can click on that and go to their websites and get more information about each of these sponsors. Another one is ThinkSpace, and that is a new environment for conferences that opened up in Lansing. And again, the icon on our webpage will lead you to them. It's just a real different kind of a setting to have conversations. So I encourage you to look at that, especially if you're in the Lansing area or want to meet in that area. That's a great venue. And then, of course, we're proud to be a part of this as well, EdTech Specialists. So I will encourage all of you to check out our website and what we're up to. We're certainly encouraging districts to look at this competency-based education model and, have like Cindy's going to do, have conversations that will help us build up to the point where a lot of districts have gotten to. A couple other things I wanted to mention. I want to go back and mention that CBE, Competency-Based Education Cohort. If you are interested, please contact me. Dave, I know you're still on with us, and I thought, this dynamic grading could be one of the topics that we cover in that cohort. So, and I will put you in touch to the two of you, Dave and Rose, because it sounds like, Rose, you've got some resources that would be good for all of us to have. Question I do have for you, and then we'll get back to Jan, who has a question here. Oh, no, I guess we're okay there. I don't know, Lisa, I'll let you look at what you put in there as I'm finishing up here, or kind of wrapping up. Rose, is it possible for you to send this PowerPoint to me so that we could get that on the website?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, no problem.
Good.
Happy to do that.
Great. Good. Then once we get the recording up on the website, we'll add that to it. So those of you who are with us, send people to these to our website. It's edtechspecialistswebinar.com, and then there's this little bullseye. Click on that, and you will see the other ones that have been recorded. You'll see Rose's webinar will be posted there, and this PowerPoint. And don't hesitate to contact us if you want a certain topic covered, or if you know of someone that we can add into our list. We are more than happy to do that. It's been very exciting to date, and I know it will be in the future. So, Lisa, is there another question that
Yep. Jan had a question saying that if the district has moved to standards-based grading reporting, what would be the next step or the path that they would go on to move to competency-based?
Yeah, actually, that's a great place to start. And I think teachers need to see that as a beginning and not an end point of the work. I think what we've found is if you've gone to standards-based grading, you still may not have overcome the individual grading practices that teachers have in doing that standards-based grading. So that is a place you need to go. And then the other piece is what we're finding this work is that assessment literacy that teachers have needs a lot of development. We basically have handed teachers these teacher guides that have tests in them, that have questions in them, and they can be of very low quality. We found the Rochester School uses several programs, elementary programs, and when we actually tested the assessment items that were part of the assessments in the programs, they fell short of what was needed to actually show mastery to the competencies. So it's a good starting point, and especially if you've got a technology student information system or learning management system that can support it. By and large, that is a piece, and again, more conversation to come around it, is that student information systems are inadequate in actually being able to do the dynamic work of formative assessment, tracking student learning, moving students. The learning management systems are far better equipped to do that, and districts are really, it's problematic to find these student information systems that can talk to learning management systems back and forth. And so that's another aspect of this work that you have to deal with. But yes, starting with, if you're already at standards-based grading, to move to competency-based isn't just putting different labels into a system. It's what are the competencies that are needed for graduation? What does that look like K through 12? How do we then track that through our assessment systems to be sure that we're assessing kids against the learning progressions and assuring mastery along the way? And so that's maybe a long answer to a question that should be easy, but it's really complex.
Thank you, Rose. Jen, if you would like to ask anything further, we can open your microphone or you can put it into the chat. If not, I think I'd like to give it another couple of seconds here in case somebody is prompted to ask another question or ask to speak to Rose. Again, I mean, I thank our sponsors, and again, look at the website. I'm thinking the cohort thing. Anybody who is interested, and I can see that we've got some people from Michigan here, some new people who I know well, and Drew and Jared, it's nice to have you on with us. If you have any interest in that kind of a participation, let me know. I also want to point out that our next webinar is August 3rd at 9 a.m., and it will be our pleasure to have Dave Frazier with us. Oh, Dave Frazier. Boy, Lisa, I knew that would happen sooner or later. Dave, I do that all the time. Dave Richards from Frazier. And last week I spent some time down in Frazier, and it's such a pleasure to be with a group of people who are definitely student-centered, looking at personalization, have launched into competency-based education. And David, and I believe a team of people, it looks like, maybe will be presenting to us on August 3rd at 9 a.m. And this is really kind of from the practitioner level. It's a little bit different perspective. So I'm really excited about that. So I encourage all of you to, join us for that. Go to the website. It's the same login information for every webinar. So I encourage you to join us. I think we do have another question there, Lisa.
Yep, Jan asked about recommendations for a good learning management system. In our last webinar, there were some suggestions for learning management systems. And Dave, I'm going to unmute you. Could you share a little bit about the one that you are currently using, or that you will be using?
It's Learning.
It's
Can
Learning.
You hear me?
It's Learning. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody again because there is a reverb. But it's learning, Jen, and I'm pretty sure it's itslearning.com. And I think in the last one we sent information. I don't know, Marcia, with the last webinar, did we also send out the information that had the couple different management systems that they talked about?
I think they're on our website. I think I'll have to go back and take a peek, but I think we had Aaron put those up there for us.
Okay.
This is Rose. Just along those lines, if you go to CCSSO commissioned 2 revolutions to do a study of technology software, and if you go to 2revolutions.net, it will take you to, or CCSSO, it will take you to their for technology to support competency education systems. It's Learning is it's a good. I'm not saying it isn't a good management system, but what we've found out is that a decision to go with a learning system has to be based on a district's inventory of software currently on board. We're finding out that for many schools, they're not even using some of the software to the potential that they need to or can. They're not aware of it. And the learning management system you may ultimately choose might be the one that works best with your student information system. And so the roadmap is actually a process for you to go through to determine the capability of your current systems and also look at what you think you need and what different pieces look for. So for example, if you're a power school, you may find out that if you bundle that with Desire for Learning, or if you're an MMS school, you'll bundle it with It's Learning. It's a process that you go through, and the roadmap takes you through that process of looking at your current technology capabilities and gives you better information to make future decisions on.
Is that the Council of Chief State School Officers page?
Yes.
Okay, and where did you say it's on there? I wanted to put that in the chat.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, hold on a second. Just let me switch over to my other computer and I'll give you the better website for that. Just take a second. And I'm gonna type it into the
chat,
into the box, and you'll see it. But
great, thank you.
This. I hope this is what is going to get it to you, but
actually, Rose, also maybe when you send us the PowerPoint, maybe you could also just send a little, anything else that we could add as a resource. That would be excellent. Thank you.
That's it. That's the address. I hope that's going to do it.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
I just don't know that shows up for us who are live. I'm not sure that shows up in the recording. That's why I thought it'd be good if you could just give us anything else that you think would be helpful, and we will add the links. That'd be great. Thank you. Good. Thanks very much. Anyone else have a question? Rose, next time we talk, let's try to do it in person. It's been a pleasure having you.
That's great.
Webinar. I would love to see you. Maybe I'll have to come your way. I love New Hampshire, so maybe I'll come out your way sometime. But
please do.
Try to get you to Michigan.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Thank you all.